For those of you just getting into live streaming, you'll probably find that the newer switchers like the Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro use HDMI cables. But for some of your setups, you're going to find that you need a longer cable and HDMI isn't quite going to cut it. In this video, we'll talk about an HDMI option that will still let you run cable runs for a few hundred feet. Hey everyone, my name is Zeph Moses Blacksburg, and thanks so much for coming back again for another video on my channel. If you want to see more videos about live streaming, equipment, tips, and tools, be sure to hit that like button right below this video and give us a subscribe so you can be notified when we have new videos that come out each and every week. I wanted to do a video about a topic that's coming up quite frequently, both on the Facebook groups and some forums, about HDMI cables, because many of you are starting to invest in the Blackmagic A10 Mini Pros, A10 Mini Pro ISOs, and you're finding out that they are HDMI only, meaning there is only one type of cable connection that you can use, and HDMI is actually fairly limited. So HDMI cables technically only go for about a 25 to 50 foot cable run. They're rated for about 50 feet, but you'll find that most stores aren't going to sell anything longer than 25 feet. So I've found that on bigger live streams for professional productions, we're most likely going to be using what's called an SDI or a BNC cable. And SDI cable runs can actually go for about 300 feet. And that's why it's typically used in the professional setting. And also, these cables are just super tough. You can really beat them up and take them on the road with you. And they're made for that professional broadcast level of live streaming. They actually have a locking barrel connector, and that allows you to make sure that it's not going to accidentally become unplugged while you're moving around with your camera. So you'll see guys typically on the sidelines at an NFL game that are wrangling these cables up because these are made for professional uses, and you'll see them quite frequently in that world. So what happens when you buy something like, no product placement here, I just love the A10 Mini Pro and use it a lot. What happens when you buy one of these and you realize that it's your church or an organization, or maybe you have an event that's going on and the room is obviously going to be way bigger than just a simple 25-foot cable run? So one thing that you could do is, if you have a camera that's in the back of the room, you could just run a simple 15 or 20 foot cable back to you from your main maybe wide shot camera. That's what I'll do very frequently. And that works great for that solution, but what happens when you need your close-up or a camera that's got to go all the way on the other side of the room? Well, I want to introduce to you two different options that you can use for this. Okay, the first one is using a converter and getting your signal to be from HDMI over to an SDI cable so that you can do a longer run. The problem with this is that typically you need to have an HDMI out of the camera into your converter. It converts it to SDI, and then you do your long SDI cable run. And then if you're using something like the A10 Mini, which only has an HDMI input, then you've got to be able to convert it back. So this is a real problem because you're putting 2 points of failure down the line, right? You've got two converters that you're putting in. You're also probably going to have a converter that needs power. So you now have to have another power outlet used at both the camera side and at your end where you're converting it back to HDMI. And again, just lots of points of failure, and this is going to be such a huge mess in the long run. So it's something you could do, right? It's not something I want to say, oh, don't do this ever. In fact, we've done this a couple of times using, these are the Blackmagic micro converters, the bidirectional, so I can basically take HDMI in and convert it to SDI out, and then I can also loop HDMI out if I had to send it somewhere else. Or vice versa, I could take SDI in, convert it to HDMI, and I could loop the SDI out somewhere else. So it's nice when you want to maybe give your camera operator like a monitor next to his camera and kind of split the feed off there right at the camera. But you know, for me, it doesn't make sense to have all these points of failure added on, especially when I'm trying to travel light and trying to make sure that I have the least amount of issues possible. Now, one other converter that I'll mention is the decimator, and there's a time and place for this. I use this on set quite frequently because the decimator is really good at converting frame rates. I know that the A10 Mini has a built-in scaler, but one thing that I found is if you're trying to send a camera out to other TVs, they might have certain limitations on what frame rates and resolutions they can accept. So for example, I've got an older TV in here that we use in the studio sometimes. It's 720p and it's not compatible with 60 frames and it's not compatible with 24 frames and it only works at 30. Well, using something like the decimator, kind of similar to that bidirectional converter, I can take either HDMI or SDI in and convert it out to either or, and I can also scale it so I can change the resolution. But what if you are on set, you're doing a live stream, and you want to stick to HDMI, you want to do a long cable run? Obviously, this would not cut it. This is only a 6-foot HDMI cable. What do? Well, one of the cables that I discovered as of recently when I first started live streaming, as COVID has eased up and we've been going out more in public, was an HDMI fiber cable. So I want to introduce you to this HDMI fiber cable. I'm going to make sure that I link to this down in the description right below this video. So if you're looking for some of these, be sure to click that link down below. We do get a nice little thank you commission if you do order using our link. So just a little affiliate commission notice right there. I'm not making your product any more expensive if you click on those links. We just get a little kickback for sending you their way. So this is an HDMI fiber cable. This is 65 feet, but we have seen them go up to 150, 200, 300 feet. So you can find a 300-foot fiber optic HDMI cable. And what I love about this is I can just keep one cable, right? Like, I don't have to go through converters. I don't have to worry about points of failure. Like, if there's a point of failure, it's going to be this cable. And if I just need to replace this cable, then I'll do it. I bring extras with me to every live stream. I'll just chuck this in the trash, keep going. I won't chuck it in the trash. I'll usually mark it off and I'll bring it back and I'll test it later and see what's going on. But I love these cables because then I don't have to bring a whole bunch of other stuff and put it in between down the line. So this one in particular being 65 feet, I need to teach you something about HDMI fiber optic cables if you're going to use them. One thing that most people forget or don't know about is when they go to hook these up, HDMI fiber cables are only one directional. So that means that one side can plug into the camera and one side can plug into your switcher, but you have to plug in the right one, otherwise your image is just going to be plain black. So typically what they'll do is on the connectors, they'll actually print on there, one will say source and one will say display. And so display is where you want to display that image, source is where the image is coming from, typically your camera. So I really like these cables. I've tested them out quite a few times on live streams recently, and to be able to do that longer cable run, this is fantastic. It's basically a fiber optic cable, but the ends are terminated as HDMI cables. So this works perfectly well with things like the A10 Mini Pro, any other switchers that you might be using, any other converters that you might need, or splitters, and I really like the long cable run without all the mess. So one other quick thing that I wanted to mention here was if you do buy through the links that I provide, these are typically, Asian, I don't want to call them knockoff sources, but they are not brand name companies that you've ever heard of before. It's not like you're going on to B&H Photo and you're ordering from the typical manufacturers, right? So these are kind of, I don't want to call them sketchy, but I want to say from a build quality standpoint, I've learned something that you can also incorporate in your cables to help make sure that they last longer. So the first thing being is you don't want to ever bend these more than about a 90-degree angle. So I never want to get these knotted up. I never want to tug on it too much when I'm going to wrap up my cable at the end of a shoot, because if I'm stuck on a knot, it could potentially ruin the entire cable. It could break that fiber optic cable inside of this. So that's number one. And then number two is, remember how I said that at the beginning of this video, if you're using a fiber optic cable, it's one directional, meaning only one side can plug into your camera, the other side can plug into your switcher. It doesn't work both ways the way that a typical HDMI cable would, or it doesn't matter what side I'm plugging in. So one thing that I've gone ahead and done is I've taken a colored electrical tape. It doesn't matter, blue, red, green, yellow. I've got multiple colors so that when I have, say, 4 cameras plugged into a switcher, if I say, okay, cable 2, I'm having issues with it, and I've got someone else that's 100 feet away trying to figure out what cable it is, then I can say, this is the blue cable, find the cable that's blue. So I'm going to show you a close-up here so you can see this. Basically, each cable, I've wrapped the ends of it in a colored electrical tape so that I can tell the difference between the cables. But the second thing that I did was I took a label maker, and I'll also list the label maker down in the links below because I absolutely love my label maker. And I labeled on one side the distance of the cable. So in this case, this one says 65 feet, so I know how long the cable run is. And then on the other side, I've labeled one with camera or cam, and then the other side says out for output. And this way I know which side goes to the camera and which side goes to the output basically into my switcher. And that way I don't have to worry about running the cable the right way. If I've got an intern with me, they're not going to mess up because it's pretty darn obvious which one goes where, and I always make sure to explain to them which side is which. So fiber optic cables, I'm going to make sure that I put a link down in the description below so that you can find some of these for yourself. The link is to the ones that I have personally bought and used. Actually, this one right here that I just used on a live stream last week at the time of recording this. And I'm also going to list the label maker down below because I really think it's a fantastic tool. Think about all of the power adapters and things that you've brought with you over the years, right? Like you could mix them up, not know which one goes to which light or which device, especially with these microconverters. The power adapters look almost exactly the same as the A10 mini ones. So labeling all your stuff is really helpful. And when you're on a shoot with somebody else, then it helps you keep track of whose is whose. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button below. Give us a subscribe if you want to keep supporting us and see more content just like this. And I hope you get a chance to check out HDMI fiber cables for your next live stream so that you don't have to do the odd little conversion thing to SDI, then back to HDMI. And yeah, we want to make sure that you can do some nice long cable runs and not have any issues. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.